This is your girl, Empress Goddess. Welcome to Empress Goddess Presents Esoteric America.
In my last conversation with Court Lindahl, we looked at the great octagonal structures of the world and their interconnectedness with one another and the greater bloodline connections. Today, we move the story westward to Nova Scotia and the United States, where we go into a much deeper aspect of the story that, and with recognizable players. Some people, if there weren't history buffs in the last conversation, had to keep pausing and go to Wikipedia at least to figure out who we were talking about.
I have to do that sometimes too.
Yeah, I did too when I was researching this. So, okay, first of all, I want to backtrack a little. We ended up talking about the women weavers, the Merovingian. I always trip up on that word. I have for years, Merovingians. And then the knowledge then passed through to Theodora, Sophia, and so now we're going to take the story further of the women, the lineage of women and these practices to a little more modern time and go to Mary Queen of Scots and her mother, who is lesser known to us. But first, you say we need to lay the foundation with Frederick the Second.
Right, the Holy Roman Emperor.
Right.
He was an amazing person. He was a very intelligent man who was aware of astronomy, and he was schooled in all of the liberal arts of the time. His magi was none other than Michael Scott, who many people associate with Merlin.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael Scott wrote a book about spherical geometry in the 13th century. So to assume that people during that era weren't able to do what I'm saying is just crazy, given these kind of things. So Frederick the Great was descendant of Charlemagne, and he was initiated into the mysteries of Charlemagne, and he was one of the Roman emperors, Holy Roman emperors, that opened Charlemagne's vault for reasons unknown, but I believe that Charlemagne left a mystery behind that he responded to. And he even built the golden sarcophagus that Charlemagne's stone sarcophagus is inside of now. So him and previously Frederick Barbarossa both quested for whatever Charlemagne left behind.
And that was knocked on from Constantine and on. And again, all of them contained an ancient understanding of geometry that laid claim and defined land, that worked with the cosmos, we shall assume, and brought also greater mysteries of understanding with it in the esoteric sciences that were passed on, right?
Certainly.
So here we come to him.
Sure, later I termed that Templars using templates to create templum to control the temporal fabric.
Yes.
So that's exactly what the earlier people were doing as well. And Frederick II was no exception to the rule.
Is it assumed he was a Templar as well?
No, actually, he had an adversarial relationship with the Knights Templar.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about that just for a sec before we go to the women.
When he was the leader of one of the invasions of Jerusalem,
right?
And he displeased the Templars because he, via diplomacy, was able to get Jerusalem back rather than by military force. So the Templars were dissatisfied with him because of that, and other things he did. He operated beyond the bounds of the church. The Pope called him the Antichrist, and he was, excommunicated and re-accepted into the church several times. So he was a really intelligent person who surrounded himself with intelligent people like Michael Scott, as I was referring to before. And he built two octagonal structures. One of them is the tower at Monte Sant'Angelo, which is basically a shrine to the cult of St. Michael.
And this is located where?
In southern West Italy.
Okay.
Kind of southern Italy. Frederick II was the king of Naples and Sicily. So basically that's the southern part of Italy that the Vatican or the Lombards or any of the other families didn't control at that time. So he had his own domain in Sicily. Here's another one. He emulated Charlemagne. He had a harem, which is odd, the Muslim attribute. He valued the knowledge and the geometry and mathematics, astronomy, astrology, all that.
Of the Eastern world.
And that's why he, had Michael Scott with him and others too. Michael Scott wasn't the only one, but I believe Michael Scott assisted him in these 2 octagons that he built, Monte Sant'Angelo and then Castel del Monte, which is a really interesting and elaborate octagonal structure where each corner of it has another octagonal turret on each corner.
Powerful.
Yes, and that points to Oak Island. And the other tower he built at the Shrine of St. Michael points to the International Peace Garden. So I think what he's doing is showing us knowledge all the way back to Vespasian and Titus that Charlemagne also knew. And also the tower at Monte Sant'Angelo points directly to the Tower of the Winds in Athens, the octagonal shape of it. So in some of these, he's covering more than one spot or a couple of spots. So what this leads me to believe, not just the fact that he built the towers, but other things he did during his reign, that he may have been the first one to come to North America. Not personally, but I think he sent people to claim, based on the earlier legends of like St. Brendan or other Viking explorers. I mean, we know Lansaw Meadows in Newfoundland was there in 1000 AD. So after that, the doors open, really, even though people still have trouble believing that people came before Columbus. We know they were here.
Right.
So this information could have easily got to Frederick II because he was of Norman descent. And we know the Viking culture had a huge influence on that, as well as Charlemagne. So he's related to both these cultures that value the directional attributes of buildings in this manner, and the family groups.
And so he contributed
certainly
to his own structures.
And really, we're going to see his family members even claim these areas later in North America under the auspices of England, because we know the Hanoverian English royalty was German.
Yes.
And they all had a direct line back to Frederick.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that compels me to believe that he made an effort to claim North America, and that he possibly did it from these places in mystery that we all know about on the East Coast.
Okay, so we'll pick it up from Frederick II, because I would like to run the woman's side of the story alongside this story that we've already opened.
Okay.
And so we're going to go back from Frederick II to the mother of Mary, Queen of Scots, right? And her name was Marie de Guise, or Marie of Guise, as you like to say. And let's talk about who she was, what her unique contribution was on the planet, and then go into her daughter.
Okay. Well, these two were descendant of Frederick II also, this is the 16th century by now, so it's about 350 years later. But they have Stuart, and Frederick II was also married to Eleanor of England, so his wife was even English. So there's lots of connections there traditionally between these German factions and the English. And we get to this point in the mid-16th century where Marie of Guise is trained at the St. Clair Monastery in weaving. And
St. Clair is a critical name in all this, too.
And that could definitely relate, or actually does relate, to the real St. Clairs. And she trains her daughter, Mary, Queen of Scots, in the same arts. And there's actually a really interesting tapestry by Mary, Queen of Scots that has lots of esoteric and hidden things in it. But most of all, there's an octagon with a sun face in it, very similar to the Cross of Vendée. And it has a smaller octagon with the AVM Auspice of Maria symbol, but including the hook on the X portion of it, like we see on the Kensington runestone, that most people would know about that through the work of Scott Wolter. So everything that Mary, Queen of Scots did can inform one that she knew of the mysteries, and she was aware of what Theodora had done, and the I hate to use the word cult, but cult of Mary Magdalene, culture of Mary Magdalene that had been hidden.
So these were the learned women to complement the learned men that we've been speaking about, with the same knowledge base.
Certainly.
Yes.
And this even came through the Cathars, I believe, because they're known as weavers also, and share, as well as the Aryans did, a lot of these Gnostic
Mm-hmm.
alternative Christian concepts to what the Latin Church believes. So in response to that, I mean, you see this all through history, alternative Christian sects forming mystery schools in order to survive, to keep it secret. And I believe some of the embroidery and weaving was used to do precisely that.
And you know, I've thought about this. Perhaps not just to keep it secret, but to keep it intact.
Certainly.
If
yes.
you take information and then start just distributing it every which way so it grows looking this way here and that way there, you don't have any actual pure knowledge anymore.
I agree.
And so that again, it can be misconstrued to using it in a secretive manner for control over those who don't know.
Certainly.
Or you can look at it as a lineage of knowledge, which is to keep it as pure as it can be so it can continue to be passed on and not misinterpreted.
Certainly. And with regard to that, too, you see kind of a course of initiation
Yes.
that these individuals are brought for. I see that in Thomas Jefferson, who we're going to talk about later.
Yes.
Going through a similar thing, Benjamin Franklin, some of the other first families of America. And obviously, we see this with Mary Queen of Scots being sent to learn at the nunnery
Yes.
how to weave. And this, it just seems awful coincidental that, you know, Theodora started these groups of nuns that were weavers, and then we see these powerful people later hiding things, doing the same kind of activity.
Exactly. Okay, so I just wanted to get that out. Now, because again, this is a very hard story to put chronologically or even in a linear context, because it's going back and forth in time and space. But would this be an appropriate time to bring up St. James and the Jacobites? Or should we bring that in later?
Let me just another comment about Mary Queen of Scots, that she is kind of the basis of the Jacobite movement in a big way. We know eventually she was beheaded.
Yes.
And her liaison between Queen Elizabeth and herself before that was a man named Robert Beale. And this is the same Beale family that I suspect later is involved with the Beale treasure.
And we're going to have you explain that in a moment, the Beale treasure.
And all of the other mysteries of North America that all seem to reference these man in the mountain myths, like the Charlemagne vault legend. So she was instrumental in that. She was an object of adoration and value by what would later be termed Jacobites, because she was beheaded, almost sacrificed for their cause. And after this, we see a huge political turmoil in England, where from ruler to ruler, they would change back and forth. You know, Catholicism's okay now. Now it's not okay. Now it is. So they created the mystery school in order to survive, I believe. And this led to the some of the ethos and philosophy of the Jacobites, who also value St. James and the Camino de Santiago.
That's where we wanted to go next.
And I believe part of that value comes from the Queen Scota legend, because this is the same region of Spain where Queen Scota sighted Ireland from the tower in A Coruña, which is an actual tower there that's suspected to be a Phoenician lighthouse, that she seeded the population of Ireland and Scotland. So we know this is highly valued by Scots nobility. Even Robert Bruce and all of the other Scottish earls of his era signed the Declaration of Arbroath, which stated they were all descendant of Scythian and Egyptian kings. So they're telling you, they're not even, this isn't speculation. They even believe this. And I think a lot of the things they did throughout their lives in history reflects that they actually believe this to be true, including Mary Queen of Scots and Marie of Guise and everybody else. So she became a huge symbol to kind of this hidden Catholic ethic that I believe even in a very major way created the United States of America.
Okay, that's where I wanted to go next. Right here, there's a comment in your book. It said the Americas might have been a Jacobite plan from the beginning.
And you can see that in the early colonial times. For years, there's been speculation there were Jesuit and Christian spies or interest infiltrating Jamestown, which was there since 1607, about 20 years, significantly earlier than Plymouth Rock. And we see that Captain Gabriel Archer As recently, his body was dug up and he had a reliquary that had bones in it and a few fragments of pewter finial that may have designated that he was a standard bearer in the Order of the Bath or Order of the Garter, possibly. So that indicates he was Catholic. But what's interesting is he had one cousin that was a priest at Santiago de Compostela during the same era. And another one of his Croft relatives headed the Jesuit college in London at that time under King James I, who after a while became more lenient towards the Catholics. Mm-hmm. His mother was Mary, Queen of Scots, although he was raised to be Church of England and not Catholic. I think it's even possible that King James was a Catholic sympathizer or possibly even a secret Catholic, because he seemed to favor a lot of people.
I might have to cut this short, y'all. I don't start it.
Were Jesuit
hemorrhoids don't start
Catholic oriented.
We'll see. Trying to find something here, y'all. I'm still here. Trying to find something here, y'all. I'm still here.
Organizes them into 22 pathways on the Tree of Life. These 22 organizes them into 22 pathways on the Tree of Life.
Okay.
My journey through physics has been an interesting one. That's what put me on a new path to bridge the science and spirituality through sacred geometry, numerology, tarot, astrology. You know, I've learned all of these systems as different ways for communicating with the universe.
You can really change your life if you tap into this.
Then there's 22 archetypes or 22 pathways that are these life lessons and transformations that we're supposed to go through. It's not just about having the information. It's about directly experiencing it so that I can create the life I really want to live.
Welcome to Beyond Belief. Dr. Teresa Bullard is with us, a PhD, a physicist, hosts a great program on Gaia called Mystery Teachings, and is an international spiritual teacher with the Modern Mystery School. Now, she merges science, ancient wisdom, powerful time-tested techniques for harnessing consciousness, which is pretty interesting for a physicist, Teresa. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, George. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell me about your physicist background. How did that all happen for you?
You know, a lot of it was, I think, the universe guiding me into physics. But I started out wondering what was I going to do? You know, as I got into college and was going for my degrees, what was I going to major in? And I had been having, I was on a tour to try and explore some colleges. And then we went through Sedona, and my mom and I were on this road trip. And we had a really magical time in Sedona. That's just with the vortexes and too. Yeah, very beautiful, and it's just very elevating. And so then we were driving through the desert at night, looking out at the stars at night with no light pollution, and you could just see the whole Milky Way stretching across the sky.
Stars.
Yeah, I might have seen a shooting star that night, and I just remembered thinking like, gosh, what is out there? I want to know what's out there. Like, there's got to be so much more going on in this universe than our mundane little lives here on Earth. So I want to know what's out there. And that was the moment that I thought, oh, that's what I will study, is astronomy and astrophysics. And so then that led me into getting first my bachelor's in physics. And then when I was in the physics studies, I really got excited by high energy physics, particle physics, astrophysics, and went into then graduate school to explore some of those topics. And my journey through physics has been an interesting one. And ultimately, I ended up doing my dissertation work in crystal chemistry, material science, and origin of life theories. And
That's fantastic.
Yeah, very, very eclectic kind of
You seem to
process.
merge a lot of that into your television show here on Gaia, Mystery Teachings.
Yeah,
so
I
you've
do
taken
try.
that love and that passion, and you've turned it into that too.
Yeah, I always found that I was one who really liked to explore a broad range of topics and see how the different pieces of the puzzles fit together, even when they were disparate fields, different, like DNA versus quantum physics versus our psychology.
Sure.
And yet I was often one of those people who was just, my mind was really good at putting those puzzle pieces together. So most physicists tend to be very into the minutia and the details, and they get really deep into their expertise in one area. But I was one of those people who was more like learning different subjects and putting them together.
Would you have loved to have met Albert Einstein?
Oh, yeah.
What would you have asked him? If he were on Mystery Teachings, you're interviewing him, what would you have asked him?
I would have asked him what he feels is the most important aspect to life. And I think I know what he would have answered, because he often talked about it, which was creativity.
Yeah.
To not just get so stuck in the left brain, and to allow the spirit to explore through the creative dimensions as well, and have that balance between the two.
Have you been able to merge science and the spiritual aspect of life?
That has been one of my lifelong goals, is to find the ways to merge the two, because I feel that the science really gives us a very grounded, rational approach to the world and trying to understand how things work from first principles, but it lacks the deeper meaning and purpose to it all. Yes, we can apply those technologies towards, the science towards the technology and advancing from that perspective, but what's the deeper purpose when it comes to our lives and how it makes our lives really better or more meaningful? So I feel that the spirit and that pursuit of what is within us and what is the purpose of our lives and the meaning for why we're here, I feel like that for me personally was such a big piece, a key to bringing a sense of balance and joy and direction to why I was studying what I was studying. So bringing the two together has been, the keys.
That's your goal.
Yeah.
You could tell on your program that you're looking for that answer.
Yeah.
And trying to merge. As a matter of fact, on your first season of Mystery Teachings, you jumped into a story about how 22 different aspects of our personal selves are living within ourselves.
How does this work from the metaphysical perspective then? Well, the science of universal Kabbalah limits the number of parallel realities we might be in based on the pattern of the tree of life, rather than a potentially infinite number, as in the many worlds interpretation. Kabbalah organizes them into 22 pathways on the tree of life. These 22 pathways define the archetypes of life, or the ways of living life. Have you ever wished there could be 2 or more versions of you to accomplish all you want to do in life? Or that you could have become somebody different? Well, Kabbalah says we have 22 distinct parallel realities or versions of ourselves in this physical world. There are 22 different aspects of our total self, each one being very different and living out its own physical life. In each one of them, the brain and the nervous system are programmed differently, giving us 22 unique perspectives and experiences of life and how things are. Altogether, they cover everything we need to learn in this physical life.
Teresa, I'm a Gemini. I've got 2 within me. You're talking about 22.
Yeah. Well, it's actually 22 parallel selves. So, more like if you think of from our higher self, our spirit self, that part of us is so vast that it couldn't necessarily be all captured within one aspect or one expression of the self. So it has 22 different archetypal selves incarnated simultaneously. Maybe not in this timeline that we experience. It could be throughout multiple timelines.
How did they get 22 instead of 23 or 21?
Well, that's where, we kind of are relating it to the tree of life and Kabbalah, and the tree of life being this universal template. Right. It's the pattern. And within, they actually talk about 32 paths of wisdom. So there's 10 spheres, which are 10 aspects of our total self. But then there's 22 archetypes or 22 pathways that are these sort of experiences of life, or these life lessons and transformations that we're supposed to go through. So those archetypes kind of oversee each of those different 22 parallel lives.
How do people pick up on these parallel lives that they have? How do they learn these 22 aspects?
Some people never do, but if they
true.
are on a path of really trying to know thyself, to awaken more of their full potential and their consciousness, to realize that we're more than just this, little life. Most people are living their lives with the blinders on, and they're only looking at what's right in front of them. But as they start to realize that I'm more than just one thing, and I can be the artist, I can be the scientist, I can be the athlete, I can be, the entertainer, I can be all of these things in one life. Now they're starting to wear multiple characters or working with the different archetypes of life, and that broadens their perception of who they are. And it also starts tapping them into those parallel dimensions or parallel aspects of their life.
Teresa, do you find that most successful people like Jeff Bezos, Arnold Schwarzenegger tap into this?
Some of them have. I think some of them have just gotten really good in one archetype. Like you have your Jeff Bezos or your Zuckerberg, who they're really good at innovating, or they're really good at being the leader, right? Being the emperor kind of energy. Right. So they can have success.
Surrounding themselves with good people to do the work.
And then they surround themselves with the other archetypes who do those work. So I think it's actually people who are more on a journey of expanding their sense of self, their consciousness, not just peak performance, but or just achieving material success, for example, but really awakening consciousness to a higher, more expanded version of the self. So when we're on a spiritual path and we start to study the archetypes, I think we have to study those archetypes to even become aware of those aspects of the self. So people start to, for example, just becoming more aware of astrology. That is one way to study the archetypes. Kabbalah gives us another way to study archetypes. The tarot gives us another way. Jungian and analysis and studying like the archetypes of movies and books and so forth. Like those are all ways to start becoming aware of those archetypes. I think they really have to get keyed in on that as a first step. And then they have to recognize, how is this a part of me? And how is this showing up in my life? Maybe, my best friend, maybe that person plays a certain role in my life. And, this mentor over here plays another role that I had. And they were different archetypes for me. But how am I also a reflection of them and them a reflection of me? So we have to really start to perceive life and ourselves and the people in our lives in different ways from a much higher perspective.
It's not difficult to do that once you learn the techniques, is it?
It's not difficult, but it takes awareness, right?
Yes, and you have to know about it.
You have to know about it, but you also have to pay attention to it. You have to care. And a lot of people get too wrapped up in just the mundane materiality of life that they're not paying attention to those higher, more subtle aspects that are influencing us all the time, but we're maybe just getting caught up in the drama of the details versus the bigger archetypal themes that are happening. So it's about awareness. It's a key of awareness. And then proper knowledge, but also living it, embodying it, really working with tools that help you to awaken on a daily basis to the presence of these archetypes or these symbols, these universal principles that are at play in our life all the time.
I read a book, small little red book called The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol. An incredible book, Teresa, where it just basically points out these aspects without knowing about it. But it's very pointed that you can really change your life if you tap into this.
You can, yeah. And when you become aware of them, just by your awareness of their presence, it it's like it's opening up the door for them to come more and work with you more. So by our awareness, we are opening up that possibility and almost invoking that energy into our life so that it becomes alive in our life. And as we directly experience it, it comes to life for us. Then we know it. It's not just about having the information. It's about directly experiencing it and living it in your life. And then you know it.
And learning it. Great Minds is a Gaia program by Jonathan Young, and he talks about his journey. Let's watch this.
Okay.
Joseph Campbell had a best-selling book in 1949 called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. That is to say, stories are similar over time and in different cultures, and there is one main story, the monomyth, that is told again and again. It's essentially a journey story, a quest. When you diagram the hero's journey, it's customarily depicted as a circle. You start at the top. A calling takes you away from the ordinary, and there is a descent. You cross a threshold into a place you have not been before. There are companions, allies, mentors, and opponents. There are ordeals. There is a good deal of suffering. At the bottom, the nadir, the dark night of the soul, it gets really hard. There is a death and rebirth experience. The redemption is the rising up the other side of the circle. And there are several lessons to be learned on the way back. Finally, a return threshold crossing when you re-enter the place you left, but you are changed forever.
What did he just say?
He's talking about something called the hero's journey. So the hero's journey is one of those archetypal themes or universal themes that can play out in the process of transformation, especially the transformation of the self. So we start off sort of naive, maybe excited for the adventure ahead, but then, and we start to prepare ourselves, we do our basic learning, we get our basic skills together, and then we venture off, we kind of leave home off on this adventure of life, whatever that is. And through that adventure, you start to have challenges, you start to meet adversaries, you meet teachers, you meet different characters along the way who are all a part of that journey. Whether they're an adversary or a teacher or a friend, they're all there to teach us something. They're there to help us discover the resources that are within. And then, in the real testing of the hero or the person who's on this journey of transformation, they have to meet a real dark place within themselves and really not run away from the challenge, not let their fears paralyze them, but move forward with courage to continue through those darker or challenging times, because those are the times that test us the most, but they're also the times that really reveal to us our greatest strengths. So that time is a place where we often call the dark night of the soul. It's a letting go of the false identities of the self, the personality that is just a mask. It's not the truth of who we are. And really digging in to discover the deeper essence of who we are that is more a part of our essential self, our core. And then as we emerge out of that, we start to come into greater and greater levels of light, of joy again, of breakthroughs and sense of accomplishment and so forth, until we complete the journey and achieve the goal, which is really the transformation of the self. And it's a cycle. It's a cyclic process.
Did you ever think when you were getting your degree in physics that you'd be dealing with this?
Not originally, no. I at first I just thought I'm just on a path to get a career in some field that will keep my interest,
right,
for my life, and I wanted to go as far with my education as I needed to go, so that I never hit that glass ceiling or that like kind of that's as far as you're going to go. I wanted to be able to go as far as wherever my interest took me. And then as I got into graduate school, I realized it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. It didn't talk about meaning. It didn't talk about the deeper aspects of what I was learning. It was just like, solve the equations, pass your test, do your homework, do your research, and don't ask questions about meaning or philosophy or any of that. And so I found myself really out of balance after about a year of that.
Well, and they don't teach this in school.
No, I wish they did. Maybe they're starting to teach more interesting things now, because they're starting to open up and into more interdisciplinary research than when I was there. But yeah, I realized that the search of the self and what brings us meaning and purpose was equally important to gaining the knowledge and the information that could be applied in a material way. It was like, well, what about the soul? What about who am I and what do I like to do? And how am I going to really bring my gifts into the world? And then how can I do that in a way that actually leaves some kind of meaningful impact or legacy? And so that's what really put me on a new path to finding ways to bridge the science and spirituality, but not just at a philosophical level. I wanted to really make it practical and applicable to life, where we could really see the results and the impact that it makes in our life. And that's what led me into discovering my way onto the mystery school path and deeper ancient wisdom teachings, not just new agey stuff, but deeper, really grounded, really practical and applied approach that does draw from ancient science, hermetics, alchemy, sacred geometry, divine mathematics. It draws from those ancient sciences, but then also merges it with the modern science, and yet it also has this spiritual component to it. So,
well, the fact that the ancients tapped into this tells you a lot about what they believed in those days, doesn't it?
I believe
remarkable.
They had really amazing visions and insights into how the universe works, and they needed to use a metaphorical language to try and put their visions into a context that they could express and understand at that time to teach it to others. But if you look at just the essence of what they were teaching, it's amazing how much the ancient wisdom teachings parallel what modern science is discovering today. So we have a new metaphorical language today, which is the language of science. And it might be more applied and mathematical, but we can take these ancient principles and ancient wisdom teachings, and we can take it with modern science and show how they parallel, which is a big part of what I do in mystery teachings.
What are archetypes?
Archetypes are a pattern of creation, maybe a symbol. We could say it's a symbol, but it's actually got its own life, its own being in these higher
personality.
We can maybe say personality, but it's the characteristics, right? It has its character, and it's sort of Carl Jung called it a certain motif or pattern, whereby in every book, every movie, every story that we've ever told, as well as in our own lives, these archetypes show up again and again and again. There's certain limited patterns. And those can be characters like the maiden, the hero, the king, the queen, the villain. Those can be characters.
Sounds like tarot cards.
Yes. And it could also be life lessons. So the journey of the hero, life and death, good versus evil. These are also themes that show up. But yes, the tarot are one way in which we can capture the 22 major archetypes that influence us as humans.
On your program, your latest season of Mystery Teachings, you discuss the Tree of Life in more detail. What exactly is the Tree of Life in your opinion?
The Tree of Life is a glyph, a pattern again of creation that relates to the Kabbalistic tradition, but it's really it's a sacred geometry that our own DNA is built around. You could lay out crystals according to that same geometry, our DNA, which is a liquid crystal, our own body. They say it's the pattern of creation, and it can apply at many different levels and kind of holographically from the cosmic into the microcosmic. So we use it as a tool for really helping us understand many different aspects of the universe and ourselves.
How does the tarot relate to this?
So tarot is not Kabbalistic, but because the Tree of Life is a universal template for organizing information from physics all the way down to psychology and divinity, we can use this Tree of Life as a filing system. And you kind of map all these different systems, we call them systems of correspondence, onto the Tree of Life. So the 22 major arcana of the tarot can be associated with the 22 pathways of the Tree of Life. The minor arcana, they're like the 1 through 10 or the ace through 10, can be related to the spheres on the Tree of Life. And then you have some suit cards as well, which relate to the 4 elements. So we can map this system of tarot, which goes all the way back to ancient Egypt, and we can map it onto the Tree of Life so we can show the correlations between them.
Let's take a look how you illustrate it even more.
Now, why 22? Well, it's based on the structure of the Tree of Life. There are 10 spherot on the tree of life and 22 paths that connect those together. The spheres represent objective states of being, while the pathways represent the subjective experience of traveling between them, and they're often referred to as states of becoming. These 22 pathways basically define the key lessons and transformations that we're meant to go through in life. Each path invokes an energy that brings movement, and it shifts us from one state of being to another. In essence, they catalyze spiritual and personal alchemy.
Right.
Is there anything that can help us better understand what these archetypes are? Fortunately, yes. And while there's many layers to these archetypes, one tool that we can use that makes them more relatable to our physical lives is the major arcana of the tarot. Now, the term arcana comes from the Latin arcanum, which basically means a mystery or a secret. Now, before we go much further, let me first clarify that tarot does not come from Kabbalah, but it can be related because the Tree of Life is a universal template for organizing information about our lives and the universe as a whole. And the major arcana do relate to the 22 archetypes of our physical life experiences. So they can be mapped onto the Tree of Life and its 22 paths. These correlations of the archetypes to the paths were first made by a French initiate, Eliphas Levi, over 100 years ago. And then he was followed by other initiates of the Western mystery school tradition.
These mystery schools are fascinating, aren't
Yeah, I think so too.
they? I mean, how does he develop things like that?
Well, first they would study the various mysteries, and they were like scientists to me. They were researchers. They really dug into the old texts. They also practiced. They applied the tools and the teachings. They lived it, right? And then, but they were scholarly as well. So they really researched all these different traditions, the different knowledge, the wisdom teachings, and they started to see the correlations. And Kabbalah, in particular, in the Western mystery school tradition, has become like a central framework for helping understand and put context or see the relationships between all these other kind of aspects of the mystery teachings. And so it became this framework to start organizing all of this information into one more cohesive whole, which is one of the things I loved about it, because it helps to see the connections that you might not ordinarily see otherwise.
The tarot card readers, the people who have the deck of cards and pull, are they tuned in? Do they know what they're doing?
Well, I think just by the fact that they're working with the tarot, they are developing relationship with these archetypes. But I think it also depends on which deck they use, because they're going to be slightly different depictions in every deck and so forth. But the way that we work with the tarot in the mystery tradition is first and foremost to use them as windows or like a symbolic visual representation of the archetypes, and a way to start connecting with them from our consciousness and awareness into that energy symbolically. So we're not using them initially so much for divination. We're using them for helping them become windows into the self and those aspects of ourselves. And then down the line, once you've developed that relationship with them at a very personal level, then if you wanted to use them to gain insight into synchronicities, for example, or for what people might call divination.
The tarot card readers are doing nowadays.
But they're not necessarily always studying the deeper mysteries of the tarot before they're starting to learn how to use tarot for divination. So I would reverse that process. I would learn the deeper mysteries of the tarot first, and then use them for divination, because then you really understand deeper messages and deeper teachings that are there contained within it. The tarot is like a book of wit.
That's why I don't read for the collective. I prefer to read for myself, and I present these other tarot readers that I listen to you all, because and then I also try to give y'all the background of the tarot. See what I'm saying? And I tell you, it's all spiritual. I got to preach. Sometimes I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, to a brick wall, because y'all knuckleheads ain't listening. You're listening, but you ain't comprehending.
But it's depicted in visual format versus, language, right?
Have you had a tarot card reading done
Oh,
on
yeah.
yourself?
Sure.
Is it fascinating?
It is. It's one way that we can tap into synchronicity and the universe communicating to us through symbols. I also like numerology. I like astrology. They're all different windows into the self and windows into the different themes or energies that are at play in our lives. So I think they're very helpful tools.
Are they predictive?
They can be predictive, but it's more like they're just showing you influences that are happening. We don't necessarily know how those influences are exactly going to manifest themselves, because that has a lot to do with human choice, right? So for us in the mystery tradition, if anyone were to go to a reader, whether it's a psychic reader, a tarot reader, it doesn't matter what kind of reading it is,
whatever.
Any kind. That reader should only be saying, these are the influences I see, but you always have a choice about what you want to do with this. So what do you want to do with this? It's not like this is the reading and this is gonna happen this way. It's more like this is the influence available right now. This is the message that's coming through. What do you choose to do about it, right? So we're always empowered to make a choice about what we do with the information we're given. And that's really important, I think.
I want to look at the tarot card, the Wheel of Life. And you tell us what we're looking at here, Teresa.
Okay.
Explain that.
Yeah, so this Wheel of Fortune really explains, in a large part, the whole of the journey of the hero. So if you look at the top, you see a Sphinx at the top, and the Sphinx is kind of like the guardian. It represents the spirit. It's got both the human head, but also the animal body, but it's got a sword. It's got an Egyptian kind of headdress on. So it represents a deity.
And a long tail.
Yeah. But it kind of represents this union of heaven and earth, right?
Okay.
And it's sort of this transformed being. But then you come down the left-hand side and you see the serpent, which is the search for knowledge. It's also the search of the life force energy descending into matter. And so it's in this descent process, which usually the hero's journey starts off with the descent into the world, into physicality. And then you see they call it the Hermanubis. It's like a jackal-headed human kind of character. And he's just rounding the corner and starting to ascend back up towards the spiritual realm. So it's not quite on the full ascent yet, but he's rounding the corner. And this represents humans on their ascension journey to higher consciousness. And then you have what we call the 4 holy living creatures around. They represent the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac of Leo, Taurus, Aquarius, and Scorpio. And they represent the 4 elements, the 4 watchtowers. So they're these energies that kind of anchor this experience we're having. And then in the center of the wheel, it's like a portal. You have
a doorway.
A doorway, yeah. It's a rotation. It's a cycle, and as you go around each cycle, it's like you're spiraling up to another level and another level. And it spells tarot. It also spells Rhoda, Ator, tarot. So it's kind of a clue. There's a secret mystery hidden within it. You see symbols of alchemy inside of it. So this one card represents the entire journey of the hero's journey, the cycle of transformation. So there's a lot going on in there, and it's very much about the alchemy that happens through that journey, the alchemy of personal transformation, separating out the essentials of who we are, trying to extract the true essence of who we are from the core self versus what happens on the outer realm. So it's about ultimately trying to get into the center.
That's just one of how many cards?
22 of the major arcana. And this is the 10th one, which is kind of a turning point in the whole journey. So we start off as the Fool, as a sort of naive, exuberant spirit ready to go off on adventure. And then the Fool goes through this descent until it comes to this card, the Wheel. And the Wheel of Fortune is sort of like the twist of fate. There's the fates that just sort of make an unexpected change in your life, and then that sets you on the rest of the journey.
We've got a clip of you discussing this journey and this transformation.
Returning to Kabbalah for a moment, recall that we said that the 22 major arcana can be mapped out onto the 22 paths of the Tree of Life. Well, each of these paths is really more about the 22 Hebrew letters, which are said to be an ancient language of light and creation. Now, in addition to these letters being associated with the Tree of Life, In the Sefer Yetzirah, or the Book of Formation, they're also described as being arranged on a sphere. And in this circular format, when every letter is then connected to every other letter, it forms a beautiful mandala known as the 231 gates. When we then match the tarot keys with their Hebrew letters around this sphere, we can see that it becomes like a wheel. Now in this arrangement, the key 0, or the Fool, is placed at the top of the wheel with Aleph. Keys 1 through 10 then descend down on the left side. Between key 10, the Wheel, and key 11, Justice, is what we call a turning point at the bottom. And then keys 12 through 21 ascend up on the right side. Now, as this wheel spins, it goes through one complete cycle of the alchemical process. Now in alchemy, the number 7 is also really important. There's 7 stages in the transformational process, which is something that we explored in season 3 of Mystery Teachings. In ancient Egyptian mythology, there were also 7 stages of the soul's journey through the afterlife. And in Hermetic philosophy, there's 7 Hermetic principles. So this number 7 shows up in many significant ways.
Spiritual number.
We can also divide the tarot keys into groups of 7.
That's why they say 7
when we do
is
this,
God's
the
number.
Fool, or key 0, is put into its own category, because this represents us embarking on the spiritual journey. Then keys 1 through 7, the Magician through the Chariot, relate to the stages of preparation for the great work. Now, these form the early lessons of this journey that teach us about the archetypal principles as powers within our own consciousness. Then keys 8 through 14, Strength through Temperance, connect to the experiences of life that take us through the first 4 stages of alchemy, which are calcination, dissolution, separation, and conjunction. And then finally, keys 15 through 21, which are the Devil, through the World card. These represent the final 3 stages of alchemy that refine our soul and bring us more spiritual attainment. And those alchemical stages relate to fermentation, distillation, and coagulation. We'll explore each of these as we go through the journey of this season's Mystery Teachings.
Teresa, of these 22 cards, is there one more important than the other?
I don't know about one more important. I think they all have a really important piece within
like
the
a
whole
puzzle.
journey. They're a sequence. They're like stepping stones through a sequence. But you can, in a way, capture the whole journey in 4 cards, right? So if we started with the Fool, that's us, and then that it represents us all the way through the journey. Then we had the Wheel, which we were talking about a moment ago, and that really kind of represents the process, the cyclic journey of transformation that we're going through. And then we had the Judgment card, which is right next to it. It's number 11, and that represents decisions, right, and choices that we have to make, and discernment that we have to have in this journey, and that the fact that we have to learn to achieve a balance in how those choices are leading to different results. And then the culmination of the journey is in the Wheel card, which is the last, the 22nd one, or the 0 to 21. So it's key number 21, but it's a 22nd card, the very last of the major arcana. And the World represents the final result of the Fool's journey, or the hero's journey. And it embodies, the essence of all the other cards, but in a perfect harmony within it. And it also represents that this meant to bring us to what we would call maybe a cosmic consciousness or a divine consciousness. It's a more awakened being, more perfected being. And that's what that journey is leading us towards.
Is each card representative for an individual, or does he just pick one and that's what you have to look at?
Well, we all, I would say we're a combination of different keys. So we each have certain ones that will be our dominant archetype. So for example, as a Gemini, you might have a relationship with one of the cards that is ruled by Gemini.
Okay.
But also you have your rising sign, you have your moon sign, so those are all going to have different cards that they're associated with. you're the day of your the day of the month that you were born on,
Yep.
right? Your birthday day.
Everything.
That also has a number which associates with the card as
You
well.
have
And
a
so
birth
that might
card and
also
everything.
influence you. So
My
we're a
card
combination of these
It's the
archetypes.
hermit
We're
and
not
the moon. They're my
necessarily
2 birth cards.
actively manifesting all 22 in this life. We're probably having strengths and weaknesses of certain ones that are really active in this life. But the goal to becoming more of a multidimensional, more awakened being is to come into this ability to have relationship and to see all 22 archetypes active within your life and working in a balanced and harmonious, integrated way versus just being a few, right? So the more we kind of strip away just layers of personality, which tend to be our masks, and we get more into the core essence of our true self, then all 22 can become active within our lives. And that's what we would call living a more multidimensional life.
Who interprets these cards?
Who
Would you do
interpret-
it for somebody, or do they have to do it themselves?
It's both. So the individual would develop relationship with the card. So the card, if they meditate upon them, for example, the card is meant to teach them
And they're
directly.
just like picking from the deck?
They could, or they could work with
Or
them
you
in
just put 'em
sequence.
up one at a
So
time?
in my season 4 of Mystery Teachings, which is all about the tarot and the hero's journey and living a multidimensional life, we go through them in sequence from 0 to 22. We go around the wheel in the proper order, and we work on each one at a time. And I talk about how to work with them and how to use the visual imagery of the tarot card as a meditation tool, and to work with building up the images within your own mind to bring it into a state of being alive within you, alive within your life. And you work with them about once a week, right? You take a card
Right.
and you work with that card for a week, and then you move on to the next one. Once you've gone through all 22 like that, you've developed a relationship with them all. Then you could work with just kind of randomly drawing a card out of the pack and see, okay, this is my card for the day. And then what is its message for me today? And then you work with it that way. And you can also then look up the interpretations in the books, for example, and see what else did that give you. But most important is to meditate on it and just see what,
Sure.
from the inner planes, what is it teaching you?
It's fascinating as a physicist for you to do this.
Yes. That's because in my studies in the mystery tradition, I saw how alive they really are within our own lives.
Yep.
And I started to study some of the works of Carl Jung, and he talks about archetypes and the importance of bringing our awareness to those archetypes.
Mhm.
They show up in our dreams all the time.
Yep.
That's one of the ways that
Great.
our spirit
Great.
communicates to us, or that the universe can communicate to us. So I found over time that it was really important to learn this language of the universe so that we can be in cooperation with it and communication with it.
And you learned it.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's both through sacred geometry, numerology, tarot, astrology. I've learned all of these systems as different ways for communicating with the universe and being more attuned to, or able to pay attention to, what is this symbol, this dream, this sort of experience that I've just had. What is spirit trying to teach me about me or about my life, or how's it trying to direct me? Because I feel that we are in participation with this universe. And that's a very quantum physics kind of approach to life, is that this is a participatory universe, but we need to have the right knowledge and awareness to really be effective in our participation with it. If we just let it happen to us, we're participating, but we're participating from an unconscious place. And I'd rather be conscious about how I'm participating with the universe so that I can create the life I really want to live. And I've seen how, these archetypes really do play in our lives, and how we can work with them in a positive way.
Fascinating. Thanks for being on Beyond Belief, Teresa.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Fascinating. You can watch more of what Teresa has to say on her television program here on Gaia, Mystery Teachings.
I reckon I'll play something else for y'all tonight, and that's gonna be it. The food. How many minutes is this? 30 minutes. 4. Head on. Yeah, I do this 30 minutes here, and that's gonna be it for me. I'm already laying down.
I'm Dr. Teresa Bullard, and this is Mystery Teachings. What does it mean to be multidimensional beings? And how do we expand our awareness to harness the fullness of who we are? In this season of Mystery Teachings, we embark on a journey of self-discovery and transformation through the 22 archetypes of our multidimensional self. So a big part of this journey is about helping us to, one, recognize our multidimensionality, to recognize how these 22 archetypes play in our own life, but also how they play in the life of our higher self that has these 22 different parallel lives. Well, what do we mean by parallel lives? Well, the idea goes back to our true self as being something that is beyond this hologram of this physical universe. So if we were to think of our true self as being beyond the hologram, beyond the quantum sea, in a place metaphysically that we call the great central sun, from that place of our true self, there are 22 archetypal rays or aspects of that true self that are sent out through the universe. And they go to different planets. So each one becomes like a being on a different planet. And then from those different places where our true self emanates out to, it then reflects those rays and those energies back to all the other 22 planets again. So we have one of those planets is here on Earth, but we could also be out in the Sirius system. We could be out in the Pleiades. We could be having various aspects of ourselves in 22 different planets. And then from those places, those 22 archetypes get reflected back here to Earth. And our higher self that has its emanations here on Earth then has 22 archetypes also being emanated down to Earth and incarnating. So when we say parallel lives, it's like we have 22 different aspects of our higher self living out these lives here on Earth in parallel with each other, but they're either on slightly different frequencies or they're just different people who are having a life under a different archetypal influence. It's kind of similar to why we don't hear all the radio stations being broadcast all at once, because we're only tuned in to one frequency station. And as we become more aware of these archetypes and how they play out in our lives, we can then start to consciously connect with our higher self, and then that will also help us consciously connect with these parallel lives. And the whole goal is to ultimately bring those 22 into one, to bring them all to coherence, so that we can live as our higher self, fully embodied and manifested into this physical life. So that is a matter of becoming aware, becoming more expanded in our consciousness of who we are. And then as we merge those 22 down to one, and we live as our higher self, then our higher self steps on to its next journey of not only mastering this life here on Earth, but then becoming a galactic being and connecting with its other 22 emanations on other planets. Now, if we had this kind of multidimensional awareness of all these parallel lives, our entire worldview would shift from how it is today. For one thing, judgments would fade away. We'd no longer judge our mistakes because we'd realize that all of them brought different learning opportunities.
That's right.
We'd also no longer feel competitive or jealous about the success of others.
That's right.
Because in one of our parallel lives and realities, we are the champion and the best of our class. So many of the frailties of our human ego would vanish because of this expanded awareness of our total self. Now, why 22? Well, it's based on the structure of the tree of life. There are 10 spherot on the tree of life and 22 paths that connect those together. The spheres represent objective states of being, Well, the pathways represent the subjective experience of traveling between them, and they're often referred to as states of becoming. These 22 pathways basically define the key lessons and transformations that we're meant to go through in life. Each path invokes an energy that brings movement, and it shifts us from one state of being to another. In essence, they catalyze spiritual and personal alchemy. Is there anything that can help us better understand what these archetypes are? Fortunately, yes. Well, while there's many layers to these archetypes, one tool that we can use that makes them more relatable to our physical lives is the major arcana of the tarot. Now, the term arcana comes from the Latin arcanum, which basically means a mystery or a secret. Now, before we go much further, let me first clarify that tarot does not come from Kabbalah, but it can be related because the Tree of Life is a universal template for organizing information about our lives and the universe as a whole. And the major arcana do relate to the 22 archetypes of our physical life experiences. So they can be mapped onto the Tree of Life and its 22 paths. These correlations of the archetypes to the paths were first made by a French initiate, Eliphas Levi, over 100 years ago, and then he was followed by other initiates of the Western mystery school tradition. Although there are still some debates about the exact order and mapping. So for our purposes in this journey, we'll follow the sequence of the universal Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck. This deck was first designed in 1909 by Arthur Edward Waite and Pamela Coleman Smith, two initiates of the original Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And the reason that we use this deck is that Waite was a scholar of alchemy, Kabbalah, Hermetics, and other initiatory teachings. And he drew from his vast knowledge, training, and insights into mystical wisdom. And then he teamed up with Pamela Smith to incorporate this into her intuitive artistry. And the results of their collaboration produced one of the most universal, accurate, and pure decks of archetypal and alchemical symbolism. Where does tarot come from? Well, the tarot that we know of today mostly traces its history back to Renaissance Italy and France. Now, during the Renaissance, the artists deliberately infused Hermetic and alchemical wisdom into their art. But the wisdom they drew from had its roots in the ancient Egyptian mystery schools of Thoth, the